I mean, I was completely struck dumb. And then he kind of gestured me to follow him into his living room, which is now our office, okay? But it was his living room, stacked with newspapers from all over the world, and lots of books, so you get a little note, he's a reader. He was also a smoker. And so he's smoking away and flicking his ashes into the newspapers. And I tell you, my knees were shaking. I have to make my way out of here somehow. I have 4 children waiting for me. Now, I went with an expectation, and my expectation was something I think I picked up from the priest at St. Thomas More. Was that he was going to tell me something about community organizing. Because a lot of that was going on in conjunction with churches. I mean, our president, President Obama, was a community organizer for a coalition of Catholic parishes in Chicago. So a lot of this was going, that's really what I thought was going to happen. But it didn't happen. I mean, he never mentioned a word about that. Instead, he said to me, you know what you need to do? I mean, I laid out my problem, the Council of Catholic Women and all of their cohorts, right? He said, you need to read Evelyn Underhill. Now, I had no idea who Evelyn Underhill was. Never heard of her, 1965. And I said, who is she? Who is this person? He said she's an Anglican laywoman, and she's probably the greatest student of Western mysticism in the English language. And that's what you want me to do? He said, that's what you must do. We talked about a few other little things, He was not a warm, fuzzy type, let me tell you that. He really wasn't. He was very, a lot of people had a lot of trouble, working with him. One thing was that his theology was right spot on. He was very influenced by St. John's Abbey and Virgil Michael. Virgil Michael was the great theologian who linked social justice and liturgy. So that's the way he felt. Now, he had a very small congregation, a handful of people who showed up there, right? And the other thing was he talked in a way that was mysterious to me. He talked, it was us and you, and the us was the whole black community with which he identified, and the you was me and all these people I had come from St. Thomas More. So I had a lot to try to keep straight, right? But I don't know about you, but in those days, most of the lay people I know did what our priest suggested. So the next day, I went to the library, and there, in card catalogs, do you remember those? Yes. Yeah, that was a long time ago. They belong in museums, I guess. Anyway, the card catalogs, 248 was Evelyn Underhill. And there were probably 2 books there. I took the smallest one, which was Practical Mysticism. Very hard to get her books then. I mean, she was not well known in the United States, and you could find some in secondhand bookstores. My husband used to love secondhand bookstores, and he'd come back with piles of things, and he'd say, look what I found for you. Would be something by Evelyn Underhill. But I will say, and I'm happy to say, and grateful to say, that experience changed my life. Okay. I cannot imagine what my life would have been like without reading Evelyn Underhill. So I want to tell you why now. But before I do, something else was going on. Later, maybe, I'm reading Evelyn Underhill. The speaker came from the Catholic and Racial Council. The roof did not fall in. Everything worked out all right. And after that, there was a fair housing campaign that was organized by a Catholic friend of mine and Jean's. And it was a massive undertaking. Our bishop, who was Bishop Russell, was in Rome for the council. we had the nerve to send him a cablegram and ask him if he would tell all the priests they had to preach on open housing. Guess what? He said, sure. So he did that. You know, we didn't know what we were doing. We would just go ahead and ask for something and do it. And the goal was to knock on every door in Northern Virginia and see if people would sign a pledge for open housing.
Tony and I did that.
Huh? Did you? You must have been in Falls Church doing that. I mean,
Door to door.
that's right. Probably got a few doors slammed in your face.
Four children.
That's right. That's right.
Below the age of
Get everybody you could. I called all the seminaries in Washington. There were busloads of seminarians coming into Virginia to go and knock on doors, you know. So that kind of movement was pretty much underway. But along the way, I was teaching in a seminary, and one of my seminarians called me and he said, guess what's going to take place? And I said, what? He said, there's going to be a meditation group and it's being led by Tilden Edwards. Do you know him? I said, no, never met him. And he said, well, it's right up your alley, you know, because Thomas Merton is one of his inspirations. And I said, oh, well, it does sound interesting. And he said, well, it's filled. There are 20 people. He's only going to take 20 people, and we two guys, they were solutions. We've got the places. So I said, well, do you have his telephone number? And so I called him. He didn't know me. I didn't know him. I talked my way into being the 21st person. Okay, so that was the first meditation group. Now, he came to this. I mean, later we got to be very good friends. He came to this because he was heavily involved in inner city ministry. Okay, he was at St. Stephen's Church. He was ministering to the people who were trying to pick up the pieces after the burning of Washington. And, you know, the whole Anglican community was preaching social justice. I mean, the whole place was just alive with this. And people were burning out. I mean, not only was the city burning, but people were burning out. And he thought this has to be part of a spiritual deficit. So he got himself a sabbatical. He went to California. He studied in a Zen monastery. He was there for about 3 months. At the end of that, he did a 30-day nation retreat. That probably did him in, right? Came back, and that's when he had this idea that he would start a meditation group for clergy and lay who were activists. And so we met every Friday at 7:30 in the morning. It was the new First Friday experience. 7:30 in the morning, can you imagine that? At the College of Preachers on the grounds of the National Cathedral. So the first year, I think it was 6 months before we knew each other's names, because it was a very silent event. The second year, more people wanted to come, and nothing was advertised, it was all word of mouth. So a second group was held. Tilden led that, and in that group was Jerry May, who was a psychotherapist. A lot of you probably know him, know about Dolores May's younger brother. And then by this time now, there are more and more people who want to come, and so Tilden asked Jerry and me if we would lead the third one. Jerry said to me, do you know what you're doing? I said, no, do you? And he said, no. He said, we'll be fine. All right, so there we were. But the point I want to make is that both Father Ray and Tilden came to the same conclusion, which was that without your soul being growing deep as the river, you'll never make it in social justice work. It'll kill you. So, you know, I think back on Father Ray. 20 years later, I joined the parish, but for 20 years I did, you know, I run into him someplace. He wanted to start a Montessori school for poor children in the parish. So he came over to see me. I said, I'm not a Montessori teacher. Go away. He said, no, you might run into someone. Well, guess what? believe it or not, I went to a tea, ladies' tea. And sitting next to me was a woman I knew from somewhere, and I believed she was a preschool teacher.